Okay, now that we've got our stainless steel sheet all cleaned up and trimmed and the edges are all deburred, I did go ahead and measure 7 inches up, and I put the line, that's going to be the cutoff line that I use for our 7-inch tray. But I wanted to leave this extra length on here because it would be very difficult to try to bend this piece. So I'm going to use the leverage of the extra length of metal to help bend it into the proper shape. Now, in order for these, in order to get the proper shape, what we're going to do is we're going to turn to our piece of 3-inch PVC once again. And I'm going to use that as a bending form that we're going to wrap the metal around. Now, I did go ahead and on both ends of this, I put some registration marks. So this line right here lines up with this line down on the end. So I've got a nice straight line between here and here. And I did go ahead and add some additional ones. And that way, if I have to adjust the metal, I can see if it moves. We don't want to bend it on an angle. We want to bend it nice and straight. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and figure out the best way to do this so that it's in view of the camera. I'm going to go ahead and line up the metal with my first 2 registration marks right there. And what I'm going to do then is I've got a board here, and I'm basically going to clamp this metal onto this PVC, and the board is just going to help give a little bit of extra bite on that. See, my metal is kind of sliding all over the place right now. Okay, we're going to go with that right there, and I'm just going to bring the clamp into the piece of PVC and go ahead and tighten it down right there on that side. And I've got another clamp ready. I'm going to go ahead and do the same over here on this side. Okay, and with that nice and tight, I don't think the metal's going to move anywhere. And so now it's just a matter of I'm gonna try to bend this metal along that piece of PVC, and I'm hoping it doesn't slide out from behind the board there. If it does, we'll try to do this without the board. So that seems to be working okay, and what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to try to get a couple additional clamps in, if they'll fit, right here to kind of hold our progress at that point. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over here, this other side. Okay, and so you can see the metal's just kind of wrapped right around that, and that should give me a little more bite so that I can continue just kind of wrapping the metal around the form there. Run out of table space, and this is kind of an awkward way to do that. I imagine that there's probably some kind of a metal bending brake that would do this just perfect. But since I don't have one of those in my garage, and chances are you don't either, we're just going to improvise and make do with what we've got. So, okay, we've pretty much got the bend done. I think that's going to work for now. So I'm going to go ahead and release the clamps here. Okay, so we've got the basic shape there that we need. And the idea, of course, is to bend that to a point that we'll be able to slide it into our metal ends. But we still have a little bit of work to do. We are at a point now where we need to cut off this excess material, and then we'll go ahead and try to fine-tune the bend. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp this down to the table, and we'll get it into a position where we can go ahead and cut it along that line. So let me go ahead and get repositioned again. Okay, this is kind of an odd cutting angle, the way that I had to mount this onto the table. And so I'm gonna try to cut through this really slow and be as precise as possible, and to get as straight a line as possible, just because it is an odd angle. I don't like that angle. I'm going to try to come in from the other direction. So I'm going to move the camera around over here, and we'll see if that makes a little bit of difference. Yeah, that seemed to go better. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that with a file and deburr it now, and that piece will be ready, and we'll see what we can do to bend it into a better shape. So let me go ahead and get this cleaned up. Okay, so I've got it ground down and filed off real good, so I've got some nice clean edges. And so what I've done is I've just kind of put it back into the clamps without the board on it. And what I'm going to do is just kind of continue rolling this and trying to get it into that final shape that I want. Now, since it is steel, even though I've got it kind of in this curved shape, there is a lot of springiness going on here. So we're going to have to work some of that out. So I think what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and take it off of the PVC. And we ultimately want to get it into a form that where we're going to be able to get our end caps back on here. And just by squeezing it, we should be able to do that. I'll go ahead and get that done on both sides here. So we've got that, but we've got some very obvious bowing going on in the middle just due to the springiness of this. So what we're going to try to do next is bring those in so it's nice and straight and not so bowed out like this. So to do that, what I did is when I picked up the other piece, the 3.5-inch piece of PVC, I did also get a piece of this 2.5-inch PVC, and so we're going to use this next. But I think what I'm going to have to do is like we did initially, is kind of pinch this between a board and the PVC. So I went ahead and I cut a piece of just scrapped wood that's the same length as my PVC. And this is a piece of just 2-foot PVC. When you go to buy this in the store, most stores have 2-foot lengths that you can purchase, so you don't have to purchase a 10-foot length of it. And it is the same with this 3.5-inch stuff we were using before. No sense in getting a great big piece you're not going to use. So I think what I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and just kind of get our clamps back on here. And I'm going to try to make it so that the one edge of the metal is even with my edge of scrapped wood. And I guess I should have got my clamps ready for that before we got started. So I'll go ahead and get my wood back into position here and just squeeze it between there. And we'll just go just like that right there. And I'm not going to get that too tight yet. Just trying to keep the edge of the metal even with the edge of the wood. And so now that I've got that in there, I'm going to go ahead and clamp that down really nice and tight so it doesn't jump out of there. And this next part is just going to have to be judgment. What I'm going to do is just kind of squeeze in the middle here, because that's the part where all the springiness is. I'm going to just kind of squeeze it and roll it forward at the same time. Now, I don't want to roll it so much that it kinks the metal. I'm just trying to get rid of some of that springiness. So I think I'm going to stop right there and see how that looks. And unfortunately, the only way to check that out is to take the clamps off again. So I think it's bowed a little more. So I'm going to flip it around and just do the same thing with the other side here. And this is kind of tedious, but like I mentioned before, it's what we've got to work with. And since I don't have any kind of a metal bending, I looked online, and they do have, there are ways to make a metal bender that'll do exactly this, that's made up of 3 rollers, steel rollers, and by compressing the rollers, you can roll the steel in and out of there and get the shape that you want. But since this is going to be a one-time thing, I couldn't see going to the expense of buying or building something like that. So hopefully this is going to get us what we need. So we've got it. I think that's going to probably do it a lot better than what we had before. Of course, we won't know till we kind of get it back into our end caps. So let's go ahead and get the clamps off of there and see what we've got to work with now. So we do still have a lot of bowing there, but let's see how it looks now that we've got our end caps back on. I think that's a lot better, but it is still bowed out a little bit in the middle, so I'm just going to repeat that process. I think I need to do it on both sides. This edge seems to be bowed out a little more than this side, so I think I'll just put a little more, when I do this side, just put a little more force to it. Squeeze it down tight there and just kind of roll it around. And I'm not pushing down so that the middle bends. I am rolling it so that it's bending kind of under where the board is clamped to the PVC. I imagine if I push too hard in that middle area, it would probably just kink in the middle, which is definitely not what we want. We don't want a V-shaped cooking tray. Okay, let's tighten her down real nice and good. And hopefully this is going to get us there. Okay, let's see how that looks now. Okay, so we've got more of this shape going on now, and hopefully we didn't go too far with it. Get our end caps back on, and I think that's going to do it. We've got rid of all the bowing. We've got nice straight edges. This side here is a little bit looser. I think I'm going to try to expand that just a little bit there, so it fits nice and tight inside of our end cap. And see, now this side is looser than the other side, so go ahead and expand that. It's a whole lot easier to expand it than it was to compress it. So yeah, I think that's going to work. We've got a nice straight edges for our cooking tray. So yeah, that's going to work out fine. So the next step we should do with this, we will at a point later on, we'll want to drill our holes here for in the steel, the tray part to match the ends. But before we do that, I think we're going to go ahead and work on our end cap and the handle for that. So let's go ahead and we'll set this aside and we'll move on to that next step. For our handle piece, what we're going to do, I've got another piece of stainless steel here, and this is actually 1/8 of an inch thick, so it's pretty beefy stuff. And you can see when I made my prototype, this is what I cut out. But what I did was I just did a rough sketch over here with the shape that I want this to be. So it's just going to be kind of 5 1/4 inch distance at the bottom. It's going to have an arc at the top. And what I did here was, this is my center line, and I wanted to figure out where the holes were going to be. This is going to be the hole I'm going to drill to actually mount the handle, and this is going to be the hole up here that I mount my thermometer for our tray. And so I just, like I said, 5 1/4 inches across, and then I put an arc on the top of it. Actually, I copied this tray that I bought online that I wasn't happy with. I just kind of copied the shape of it since it seemed to be a good design, just poor quality. Then the other thing that I did to figure out the position that I wanted my holes to be, I took one of the end caps and just kind of put it on here to get an idea of how it's going to sit, how things are going to look. And then kind of did a rough distance of measuring up for where the handle would be. And what I figured from the bottom to where my handle center point is going to be, that was 1 5/8 of an inch from here up to here. And so I'll eventually drill a hole there. And then for where my thermometer is going to be, I measured 3 3/4 inches from the bottom up to the top here. So the next step is I'm going to have to cut out this shape, and I am going to use this cutting wheel tool again, my side wheel or grinder. And because I'm going to be cutting an arc, and you've got a flat blade trying to cut an arc, that's why you'll notice that this cutout is pretty jaggy. So we're going to do our best to, I'm going to first cut these pieces apart, and then we'll work on them individually. And so the best thing we can do is just go ahead and cut as close to the line, but leave ourselves proud of the line, kind of like we did before. And then we'll just have to go in and clean things up after the fact and round things off with the grinder and the files. So this is going to be a little bit of a chore, but we'll eventually get there. So let's go ahead and get started. So I've got the workpiece mounted to the table, and I am wearing safety glasses for this. And as I mentioned, I'm just going to come across, I think, initially and cut. And we're going to separate these two pieces, and then I'll work on them individually to get them cleaned up. Okay, so that part's done, and I think I'm going to go ahead and work on the smaller piece first, and it's just going to be a lot of cutting and grinding, and I imagine I'm going to have to reposition this piece quite a few times on here as I'm working my way around the corner. So yeah, let's keep on moving. And you notice my cutting wheel is getting smaller and smaller, and that's why I mentioned that you should probably be sure to get a package of those, because you will go through a number of them. This stainless is hard stuff. I notice as I'm doing this, my stainless is starting to kind of rotate around. I've got this clamp down pretty tight, but I think just to play it safe, I'm going to position another clamp on there just to kind of help hold that down a little firmer. Okay, so we've now got the basic rough shape. cut out, and so now it's a matter of grabbing our files and starting to clean things up. It's probably going to take a good bit of filing, but yeah, it's what we got to go through. Okay, so I think I'm done with the fine filing. I was able to get it cleaned up pretty good, flipped it over and did the other side as well. So I think I'm going to just go ahead and hit this with some steel wool, probably some rough steel wool first, and then I'll hit it with some fine steel wool, and we'll call this piece done. And as mentioned before, this piece is going to eventually mount right onto here like that, and that's going to be the front of our oven tray. Okay, I went over this with steel wool and cleaned up the edges real good. I actually went through 3 grades of steel wool. I did this really coarse steel wool, and then I did a medium steel wool afterwards, and then I followed that up, finished everything up with a 4/0 extra fine steel wool. And I've got a real smooth edge all the way around this, and it came out really, really nice. I'm real happy with that. Now, some people may be wondering why I chose to use a file on the edge instead of something like a benchtop grinder. I do have a benchtop grinder, and it probably would have been a lot quicker to get everything filed down. But there are a couple reasons that I chose not to do that. Actually, when I did my prototype cooking tray, I did use the benchtop grinder, but there were a couple places that when I moved into the grinder with the metal, it would catch and take a chip out of the metal. It's real easy to do work fast with a power tool, but it's also very easy to make a mistake fast with a power tool. So instead I chose to just use a rasp and a file, and as you can see, my results were pretty good. Now, as far as the amount of time it took probably about, I'm going to say 25 to 30 minutes of filing to get everything cleaned up. And it took me about an hour. I did the two. I did cut out two of them today that I've been switching back and forth between on this video. And you can see that both of them, they line up pretty well. They're pretty much the same size. I can see one of them's just a little bit wider down at the bottom here. But for the most part, that's going to get me by. So if you don't have access or don't want to spend the money for a benchtop grinder, but you do have a couple files that are, you're going to want to use some good steel files. If you're dragging the file across the surface of the metal, you should see some filings. If you're not seeing any filings, then you need to just get a different file. But just find you a nice fine steel file. And same thing with the rasp. This one is just a I guess a coarser grit that I hit these with first, and then I followed them up with the fine file. But you don't need power tools to get this. Well, for cutting you probably do, but for the cleaning up like I just did, it doesn't take that long to do, and you've got something that will last forever. That's why I didn't use the benchtop grinder, just in case you were wondering. Okay, we're going to probably move over to the drill press now and try to get some holes drilled into this. So now here we are at the drill press, and I did go ahead and drill the pilot holes in my first piece. I didn't see a real need to try to record this. I mean, it's nothing more than drilling holes. But as far as the layout goes, what I did was I've got one pilot hole. This is going to be where my handle goes, and it's a pilot hole. I am going to be expanding that so that it fits a larger bolt. This is going to be what I'm going to use to hold the handle in place, and we'll get more into detail with that later on. And then this next hole up, and I think I already talked about the measurements on that in a earlier part of this video. That's going to be where my my temperature or my thermometer is, and what I'm going to be using is just a barbecue grill thermometer, and it's got a wing nut on the back of it, and so I am going to have to expand the hole a little bit more to fit this. And then I did a couple additional holes. What I did, I came up 3 inches from the bottom, and then from the center line I measured out 1 inch in both directions, and that's where these other two pilot holes are, and that's going to be where I'm going to put the rivets in that are going to permanently hold the end cap for the tube in place. So this one I've got the pilot holes drilled. I've got this other piece clamped down to the drill press table, and I'm just going to go ahead and drill the pilot holes. So now that I've got the, now that we have the holes drilled in our end piece that'll hold our handle, we need to also transfer the drilled holes onto our end cap. And so what I did is I just took a piece of double stick tape and I stuck it onto the thick metal plate. And then I carefully positioned our end cap on there and stuck it in place with double tape. Before you do this, you do have to make sure that everything's lined up nice and neat. So our two holes that we have drilled in the bottom of the end cap, I did make sure that I had it centered with our center line down below. And then I wanted to also make sure that the holes that we have in our side piece, that they are parallel from one side to the other and are nice and even on this. And so with that taped into place, what I was able to do then is take a Sharpie marker and just kind of transfer the position of those holes from the plate over to our end piece. So now I'll go ahead and pop this off of the double stick tape. And that double stick tape is kind of tough stuff. So you do see that I have those pin mark here and here for our rivet holes. I've got the smaller hole that'll be our thermometer, and down here this will be our hammer or our handle hole. So I'm going to go ahead and start drilling this piece to match this piece. Okay, so I've got the holes drilled, and to make sure that everything was lined up with the holes, I did go ahead and temporarily mount our thermometer on there, and then I did also put the bolt that will eventually go through the wooden handle. So the only thing I would need to do now is go ahead and install the pop rivets onto here, and once I do that, that will permanently affix our end cap to our handle piece. But before we do that, I think what I want to do next is take our metal trays, and we need to transfer the holes from these pieces to the metal trays. Now, if you remember back when we initially did our holes, we made this template that we laid across here and kind of wrapped around. Now, in a perfect world, we would have been able to also attach this to our trays and use this as a template once again. But because every now and then the drill bit did wander a little bit, despite us using that automatic punch and trying to get things lined up, we just want to make sure everything is precise. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to go ahead and put the metal trays in here, transfer the holes by marking some Sharpie pen marks through here onto our metal trays, and then we'll go ahead, go back to the drill press and drill the matching holes into our metal trays. So let's go ahead and grab our trays and get moving with that. So what I've done here is I went ahead and I slid our end cap back onto the tray that we made, and then I took a Sharpie marker and I just made a dot right there, making sure this was fully seated onto the tray, and then I rotated it around. I made another dot right there, and just worked my way around. And I did do this on both ends of the tray. Went ahead and lined everything up as best as I could so that everything seemed to be nice and straight in the way that I wanted. And then after I made my marks, I went ahead and I pulled the end off, and I'm not sure if you can see, but I do already have the dimple there, and that's because I did go ahead and after I made the mark, I took our automatic punch and went ahead and punched where those marks were. So now the idea is go back to the drill press with this piece, and we want to drill these holes out as precisely as we can so that everything lines up again when we go to put it back onto here. So back over to the drill press we go to get these holes drilled. So since we made the punch marks on the outside of our metal tray, in order to drill this out, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to employ our piece of PVC that we used before while we were drilling the holes. So that PVC is going to give that metal a little bit more support. So as I come down with the drill press, we should be able to support that from behind, and hopefully we'll be able to get a nice clean hole. And just like that is what we need to do. So we'll just rotate this around and keep working our way through this piece of metal until we've got all the holes drilled out. All right, there we go. Now that we have the holes drilled in our trays to match our end caps, we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be permanently affixing the end caps onto the tray. Now to do that, we're going to be using a couple of different things. We do want to make this watertight, so that anything we cook in it that generates juice, or if we've got any liquids in it, we don't want that leaking out. So ultimately we're going to affix the end caps on with pop rivets. But before we put the pop rivets on, what we're going to do is make sure we have a good sealant. And what I've got here, I'll leave a link down below. This is a food safe silicone sealant. It is 100% silicone, but I chose this because it does say on here that it is USDA approved, and so this is supposed to be food safe and okay for use around grills or in kitchens around food. So what we're going to do is put a nice bead of this stuff around the inside lip of our end caps, and then we'll attach the end caps onto our tray, and then we'll pop rivet this in place. Now before we get messing around with the silicone, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I know pop rivets are something that you may or may not be familiar with. This is what a pop rivet is, and basically it's a nail, and there's a rivet part that's attached to it, and you use a pop rivet gun, something that looks like this right here, and the nail end of the pop rivet just gets inserted into the end of the gun like that, and then the pop rivet itself is inserted into one of the holes that we drilled, and then by squeezing, compressing the handles together, what it does is it pulls the head of that nail through the end of the pop rivet, and it causes that to swell up, and it seals that hole closed, and it holds the two pieces of metal together. So that's what we're going to use. Now, since these pop rivets are going to go, they're going to extend through our end caps and into our cooking tray, there's a chance that some of the pop rivets could sometimes come into contact with the food. So I did make sure that when I picked up the pop rivets that I bought stainless steel pop rivets to stick with the whole theme that we've used with the entire cooking tray. We want anything that could come into contact with our food to be food safe. And so we don't want to use anything that's aluminum. We don't want to use any regular steel rivets because over time those are going to rust out as we're washing our tray or as they get wet. So I did pick stainless steel, and I'll include a link down below in the video description on where you can also get some of this food safe sealant, the stainless steel pop rivets, and this is a Craftsman pop rivet gun. I've had it for years, but I'll include a link down below where you can get one of these as well. Now before we take the time to put our sealant on, just to avoid any kind of mess or unnecessary wasting of this, what we're going to want to do is put the end cap in place and do a dry fit of this. We're going to slide the end cap on, and I know that our holes should line up because we actually made our magic marker lines through the holes onto the tray. But just in case the metal moved a little bit in the drilling process, we want to make sure that those pop rivets will go through both layers of metal. So I've got these pop rivets just dry set into place. They are extending through the the end cap, and then through the cooking tray, and then you can see, well, it looks like one of them just fell out because they were just loosely fitted in there, but you can see how they look on the inside of the tray. So since I know that all of my holes are lining up nice and those pop rivets are going to go in, then I can go ahead and take these out, take the end cap off, and go ahead and apply the sealant, and then go back, put the pop rivets in place, and actually set them in. This is a word of advice from just practical experience. You do want to make sure that your holes are lined up before you put the silicone on there. Otherwise, you might find yourself wiping it out and then kind of widening the holes to get everything lined up again, and then reset that. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull these pop rivets out of here. Since I know that my holes line up, I'm going to apply some sealant, and then we'll go ahead and pop rivet that into place. Okay, so I've got a nice thick bead of the silicone sealant down in my first cap, and I'm going to just go ahead and squeeze the end right into there and make sure that that sets right down into that silicone, and then I'll try to get my holes lined back up as best as possible. And then once I've got those holes lined up, it's just a matter of putting my pop rivets back into those holes. And I am going to want to get all 4 of them lined up and in place again before I start actually compressing the pop rivets. If you were to compress them before everything was lined up again, you may not get everything lined up. So I got the one in there, and now it's just a matter of getting these other ones in. And plan on getting a little bit of silicone onto your fingers. You can see I have some of the silicone that I'm going to clean that up a little bit. Some of it actually came down through those holes there. That's making it tough for me to see that my holes are lined up. There we go, got the second one in. And we know everything should line up because they did the first time. If we didn't have everything lined up then, we wouldn't really know what we were getting into right now. And it's being a little bit stubborn, and on top of that I'm getting silicone all over myself. So this is going to take a little bit of patience, I can see. I already had one of my other rivets already fell out again. So that was easy enough to get it back in there. But it's just going to be trial and error and a little bit of finesse to get those all into place. Okay, so what I found worked a little bit easier is if you get yourself some needle nose pliers and hold on to the pop rivet, you've got a little bit more torque, and it's easier to hold this with some needle nose pliers than it is to try to get it compressed down in there with your fingers. So I'm going to go ahead, and now that I've got those in place, I'm going to just go ahead and use the pop rivet gun to get them set. And to do this, we're just going to work our way around. I'm going to start with the 2 that are kind of in the middle on the bottom, and basically you just get that pop rivet all the way down in there and then squeeze, and you may have to lift once or twice. Just make sure that if you do lift it, you do go all the way back down to the end of the rivet before you do the final squeeze. Now, once you get all the way to the end, you will hear that popping sound, hence the name pop rivet. And so now we've got our first rivet in place, and that is not going to come back out, and it does go all the way through. And after we get it all done and cleaned up, I'll show you what the inside looks like. Now, after you've done that with one of the pop rivets, you do have to eject the nail part of the pop rivet. Does get pulled through into the pop rivet gun, so you do have to eject that just by opening up the handles again. It'll allow you to pull that that pop rivet end out of there. And once you've done that, you're ready to move on to the next rivet, and just repeat the process. Okay, so that's two of them that are in place. And as I do this, what I'm going to do is, you'll notice I've got a little bit of a gap right here. Before I squeeze that pop rivet, I'm going to try to close that gap up as best as possible, so it's like it is down here where I've already done the two rivets, where we've got it nice and tight. And that'll help with the silicone sealant. That's going to make a nice and watertight bond right there. And you can see it's pulled that pretty tight. So that's that one. One more to do for this end. Ooh, that one is a tight one. There we go. So we've got one end on in place, and the only way to get that back off again would be to actually put a drill bit onto our rivet and drill that out. So the next thing that I'm going to do real quickly is I'm going to go ahead and since that silicone stuff is pretty sticky, I'm going to go ahead and wipe as much of that off as I can now before it sets up too much. The other thing that I'm going to do is on the inside of it, the inside of our tray, I'm going to go ahead and kind of smooth out that bead of it that was in there, because it did get quite messy in there in the process of putting our rivets in place. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my finger and clean that up a little bit, and just kind of wipe everything down. Okay, so I've got the excess sealant cleaned out of there, and you can see the pop rivets are holding everything in place, and all the way around the outer edge we have a pretty tight seal all the way around there. So that's one side done. Now a note with that silicone, that is pretty sticky stuff, and if you find that you've got too much of it on there, or you've got it in places that you don't want to have it, you can use a little bit of acetone on a paper towel, and that will clean it off pretty good. And the nice thing about acetone, over time the acetone will just all it'll just all evaporate and it won't be left behind. But before we cook in this tray, we're going to let everything dry for a few days to make sure that that silicone is nice and cured really well, so we shouldn't have any problems with that at all. So that's one end done. Now it's just a matter of repeating the same process on our second end, and this is going to be the end that where the handle is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this, and I'll come back after I've got this one all sealed up and ready to go like this end is. Okay, so now that we've got the end caps in place and they're sealed up real good with our silicone, the final thing that we're going to do for this session is get all of that extra silicone cleaned up. We want to get it as much of it off as possible, except for what's between the two layers of the metal. So what I did next, this is the next day now, and I did let the silicone cure overnight, so it is good and cured and dry. And so at this point, what I did was I took it over to my kitchen sink, and I just went ahead and washed everything down really good to get that acetone residue off and any of the extra silicone that was just hanging out. And so it's all cleaned up. While I had it in the sink, I did go ahead and put some water in it to test to make sure that it is watertight, or that our juices won't leak out of the seam. And what I did find is, because we have in the rivet holes, they are holes that go all the way through, I did get some seepage through those. So what we're going to do is later on, we're going to go back and just touch a little bit of silicone inside of each of those rivet holes. We're not going to worry about that right now, because that would make another mess, and I'm not ready to do that. So at this point, what we're going to do next is go ahead and attach our end plate onto the end of the tube. And to do that, it's nothing new. It's kind of similar fashion to what we've been doing up to this point. We're gonna put it on, and we're gonna dry fit it into place. So I've got this other one all kind of prepped and ready to go. What I did was I went ahead and took our thermometer and I put it into the hole, so that's gonna keep everything lined up. And I did put the wing nut on the back of that. And then I just took the bolt that will eventually hold the handle in place, and I just have it inserted in so it lines up that hole. And then I took my two rivets and I just dry set those into place to make sure that my holes line up. Now you may be wondering what's going to happen if your holes don't line up after the fact. So you're going to want to position that as best as possible and line everything up. Make sure that if it doesn't fit one way, flip it around and see if it fits better the other way. But if for some reason you don't get those holes lined up really good, what you can do is just go ahead and, after you've got the two bigger holes lined up for the handle and the thermometer, just take a hand drill with your drill bit on there and just ream in and out of those holes, and that should hopefully expand things the little bit that you're going to need to get your rivets into place. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead, now that the rivets are dry set in place. I'm not going to be able to use that rivet gun with this thermometer there. I think that's going to be in the way. So I know that everything is lined up now. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and take that thermometer off and go ahead and rivet the faceplate into place. Now, once you do this, you're not going to be able to make any further adjustments. So I would suggest, before you get your rivets permanently in place, go ahead and do whatever cleaning up you're going to do on the faceplate. You may want to take some steel wool and just finish it up a little bit more on the outside. You're not going to have to worry about the inside. Nobody's going to really see that. And eventually we're going to be putting some of that heat tape over it anyway. So yeah, go ahead and take the time to clean that up as best as possible. And we'll come back when we're ready to do that, and we'll set those pop rivets in place. Okay, I've got the faceplate cleaned up as best as I could with steel wool, and I did go ahead and I removed our thermometer. I left the bolt handle holder in place for now, and I have my rivets dry set. So I'm going to go ahead and set those pop rivets in place so that this face is on there. Okay, one down. Okay, so our face plate is firmly mounted in place, and that's not going to go anywhere. So we're getting real close to being done. I can go ahead and permanently mount the thermometer back on here, and then our next step is we're going to go ahead and start fashioning a handle. Okay, for the handle, what I've decided to go with, we are going to need a wooden handle because anything metal is going to get hot because it's going to be attached to our metal tray. And this metal tray, while it's in the cooking tube, could get in excess of 350 degrees, you know, possibly even 400 degrees or more. So we want to go with something wood. And so I think what I'm going to do is I went and I just picked up an old shovel handle or a garden rake handle. And what I did, I measured off a good size that is going to fit my hand. And the bolt that I'm going to be using for this is a 3/8 inch bolt. It is 6 inches long. And so I held it up to the stick that I'm going to be using, or the handle that I'm going to be using here. And I simply measured from where the head is going to contact the round point of this handle. I measured down a point that I'm going to cut that off. And what I'll do after I cut it off, I'll take this over to the drill press, and we're going to have to drill a 3/8 hole all the way down through the center of this so it comes out the other end. Now, in addition to this 3/8 inch bolt, now this is a stainless steel bolt because the end of it is going to protrude into our cooking tube and could possibly come in contact with our food. So I wanted to stay with stainless steel on that. And in addition to this, on the outside of the cooking tray, I'm going to go with a 1.5 inch stainless steel washer there. And that's going to be kind of the transition. So the wood doesn't come in contact directly with this part. It'll come in contact with the washer. And then on the inside of the tray, I'm going to be going with a 1.25 inch washer, and then I'm going to go with a 3/8 inch wing nut. And so that's going to be on the inside of the cooking tube. And the reason that I'm going with a wing nut as opposed to just a regular nut is we want to be able to take this handle off periodically, and there's going to be a couple reasons to do that. Number one, with the handle extending out the front of this, this tube isn't going, or this tray is not going to fit into the tube when we store it away in our toolbox. So we want to make it convenient so that we can pull the handle off whenever we want and put this whole device right into the dishwasher. And normally it's not good to run wood through the dishwasher, so we're going to take our handle off for that. But more importantly, when we store this away, we'll have that wing nut. We can just pop the handle off, reverse it, and have the handle on the inside and the wing nut on the outside. And then this tray is going to fit right into our glass tube, and we'll be able to store that away whenever we need to transport or just put it away for later on. So I'm going to go ahead over to the saw and just chop this off, and then I'll set this up on the drill press so that we can bore a hole all the way down through it. at the drill press now, and you saw that I cut off the handles with the handsaw, and then I took them over to the power sander and I just flattened both sides of those. What I'm going to attempt to do now, I've got the handle mounted into a vise to keep it nice and straight, and I don't have a drill bit that's going to drill the entire length at once. So what I'm going to attempt to do is try to hold this piece inside the vise so it's nice and straight up and down with the drill bit, and I'm going to attempt to drill halfway through in one pass and then flip it over and then drill through the other side, and hopefully things will line up in the middle. Now, it's no big deal if they don't line up perfectly. What I could do is just take the neck size drill bit up and ream that smaller hole out, and as long as the bolt will still fit down in there without too much slop, I should be good to go. Well, I have to apologize to my viewers. I just went to turn off the camera to show the drilling process was complete, and when I went to turn it off, I saw that I must have missed the button and did not start the recording. So I did go ahead and get 3 of these drilled out. 2 of them I did go ahead and insert the bolts down into, and the third one I just took off. That was actually the first one that I cut off. I left the rounded top on it. But so I do have my holes drilled all the way through the handles now. And I did, just like I mentioned that I said that I would do, in that I started by drilling one side, and then once I extended the drill bit all the way down to its limit, I did pop the handle up out of the vise and insert it the other way, get it centered up, and then plunge the drill bit back down in there again. And when I was done with everything, what I did was I took it and I just, with the drill running, I just extended it all the way up as far as it would go, and then flipped it over and did the same thing down on the other side. So that has worked. I was able to get the bolts inserted. As you can see, I apologize that I didn't catch that on camera. Okay, so we've got the first of our handles here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and just take one of these, the larger of the 2 washers, and that's going to be on the outside. I'm going to simply insert that through our hole. And then on the inside, I'm going to use the smaller of the 2 washers. Just get that into place. And then it's just a matter of getting it tightened down with our wing nut. And there we go. So now we've got our cooking tray handle in place. So we're ready to go ahead and, well, we've got one more thing I'd like to do to this before we start using it in the oven. I'm going to take some of that, remember I talked before about the heat tape. Looking for that over here. This heat tape, the same stuff that we used earlier to put on the inner side of our tube holder. What we're going to do now is I'm going to cut some pieces of this, and I think that I know that I mentioned before that I wanted to put some more of the silicone inside of the holes for the rivets, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, and then I'm going to let that dry overnight. And then tomorrow, after it dries, what I'm going to do is come back and we're going to put one band of this heat tape. I don't think I'm going to go all the way around the tube, but I'm going to at least go maybe from the side of the tray on over to the other side of the tray with the tape. And what that'll do is that'll allow us to slide the tray in and out of our glass tube without risking the possibility of scratching our tube with these rivets. And I am going to do that down here on this end as well. And so I'll come back after I get the tape on, and we'll pull out one of the glass tubes and we'll do a test fit in this. And then we're about done with this project. Okay, here we are back again, and what I went ahead and did was, in addition to putting the silicone on the rivets on the outside, and then adding the this barbecue grill heat tape, I did go ahead and, because there are holes that go through the rivets completely through from the interior of the oven to the outside of the oven, I did go ahead and just touch a little bit of silicone on the inner holes of these rivets as well. And then I added the heat tape, or the barbecue grill tape, both on the front and the end of my tube. And so now I've got my oven set up in the garage here, and now I'm going to go ahead and just slide this in. And with that barbecue grill tape, that allows the tray to slide directly into the oven, and it's sliding on this bottom edge of that barbecue grill tape, so there's no chance that those rivets are going to scratch the inside of the glass oven or this rim right here where we filed off the lip on these cooking trays. So I can slide that right in there, and it feels like a nice fit. It's not too tight, but it's not really loose either. Looks like it slides all the way in. And then right here around the edge, I've got, now this is the pre-made front that I actually borrowed this from that other cooking tube. So you'll see that I have some gray barbecue grill tape. Without that, it would slide in a little bit more, but looks like I've got a nice seal. It looks like there's just a little bit of a gap at the top. That should allow any steam to escape the oven so it doesn't build up pressure, and that's probably a good thing. Now, if I'm getting too much steam coming out of there, I may get rid of this tape so that this will close a little tighter. So at this point, I'm going to call this oven completely done. I've got the cooking tray, everything's ready to go. So I think that there is one final thing that I want to do before I attempt to cook any food in this. As we were making both the oven and as we were making the trays, you remember we use acetone, we use silicone. We've been touching these a lot, so there's a lot of hand oil from our hands that are probably on these trays. And even if we wash them in the sink, we may or may not get everything off, all the nooks and crannies. So I think what I would want to do at this point, just to make sure everything is good and safe for cooking in, I'm going to go ahead and we'll set this oven out in the sun on a bright sunny day, put the cooking tube in, or the cooking tray into place inside the tube, and just let it soak up the sun and see how hot it gets over the period of 2 or 3 hours. We should know that from our thermometer or temperature gauge here on the front. But I think what I'd want to do at this point is just kind of cook off any oils or any bad stuff that might be in the tray from some of the chemicals that we used in the process of building this. And then once we've done that and I know that everything is good, then we'll wash the tray up, and then it's time to do some cooking videos. You're welcome to come back and watch. I'll post a couple of those videos. I'll probably start out with something nice and easy like, I don't know, hot dogs or sausages or burritos or something like that, but then we'll work our way up to maybe some meats and casseroles and things like that. So I will be posting some more videos of this project. I hope you'll come back and tune in as we do that. If you stuck with me this long and now you've got a completed oven too, congratulations, and thanks very much for watching. If you like my videos, please give them a thumbs up and please share them with your friends and family. Thank you much for all my viewers out there, and take care and God bless. Bye-bye.